Welcome to the Offshore Club's fun-filled, fact-filled, fast-paced blockbuster podcast, Roving with Rachel, coming to you straight from beautiful Belize, where the sun never sets on the good life at a great price. And now, here is your brand new BFF, Rachel Jensen.
Hi, everyone. Today with us, we have a very special guest, Mike Cobb, who lived in Central America for about 14 years with his wife and two daughters. And he did not move to Mexico or Costa Rica or Panama or one of those countries that you may hear about all of the time for expats. He moved to a different country. He moved to Nicaragua. Mike, why don't you tell us a little bit more about why you moved there and how your experience was?
Well, yeah, good question. You know, people hear that and they're like, what? You know, like, yeah, I moved to Nicaragua. Actually, before I moved to Nicaragua, people are like, are you out of your mind? What are you doing? Right. And then they're like, well, after the fact. But yeah, so, our company, ECI Development, we develop real estate in really residential resort communities in Belize, Nicaragua, Costa Rica, Panama. Ultimately, we're going to be in Argentina, Chile, Ecuador as well. And so back in 2000, we actually bought a very large piece of property in Nicaragua. I may say very large, 3.5 miles of beachfront property, 3.5 miles of beachfront property, 2,500 acres, a giant piece of property. Well, in 2002, it was time for somebody to go there and kind of get the ball rolling. And, and I'm one of the founders of the company. And so for me, I'm the boots on the ground guy. So I asked my wife, Carol, one day, I said, Carol, honey, we got to go to Nicaragua for a few years and get our Gran Pacifica project started. She said, how long? I said, I don't know, 2, maybe 3 years. She said, okay. We had a 2-year-old daughter at the time. So we pack up and moved to Nicaragua in 2002. And we kept our home in Shepherdstown, where we were back living here again. But we kept our home here because we figured we'd be coming back in a couple, 3 years. Well, we got down there and, it was wonderful. We really enjoyed living there, and I did everything I was supposed to do. I hired architects and engineers. We had an accounting department, the marketing department, and finally I hired a chief operating officer. And this was about 3 years into being there. And so we could go home. Our house was just renting. We could give our renters notice and move back to the States. And so Carol and I went out to dinner one night, and we started talking about, we took a piece of paper and we made a list. We said, stay in Nicaragua, go back to the US. And we wrote down everything we could think of on this piece of paper. And I mean, to even silly things like, fresh berries. At the time this was about 2005, we couldn't get fresh strawberries or raspberries or blueberries or things like that in Nicaragua. And so, when we'd come back to the States for a visit, on the way home from the airport, we'd swing through a grocery store and we'd pick up a couple pints of berries. We had a second daughter. So between ourselves and our two daughters, we'd knock off, half a gallon of berries real fast between, wherever airport and my in-laws' house or wherever we were staying. And anyway, but we made a list, every single thing we missed about living in the States, every single thing we, loved about living in Nicaragua, why we might want to move back. And at the end of the night, at this dinner, we really looked at this list, and what we said was, wow, we have a ton of reasons to stay in Nicaragua and really only one important reason to move back to the United States. We had several things like berries were on that list, other things, silly things, right? But the only thing on that list that was actually carried any weight was family. And so we really started to think about family. And what we found, Rachel, which was amazing, was we found that we actually, even though we spent less time with our families living in Nicaragua, we spent far more quality time with our families. My in-laws lived, I don't know, about 25 minutes away, 30 minutes away. And so we would drop, on date night, we'd drop Amanda off at their house and we'd go off to dinner, a movie, whatever. We'd come back. And so we'd see them dropping Amanda off. We'd come back and spend 15 minutes while Mandy was asleep on the couch or whatever and chat for a little bit, throw her in a car and go home. And so we had a lot of those, what I would call quickie kind of stop by visits. But when they came to Nicaragua, they came for 2 weeks. When we went up to the States, we stayed for 2 weeks. We stayed for a month when our second, or maybe 6 weeks when our second child was born. And my parents, the same thing. So we had this incredible quality time with our families, even though maybe it had been less often, but it was more quality. So, at the end of this dinner, we looked at this list and we said, well, let's just stay. Like life is really good here. And we decided to stay a while longer. We didn't put a time frame on it. We just said, well, let's keep renting the house. It's a little college town. It rents. So we rented our house in the States, kept renting it, and we stayed in Nicaragua. And we ended up staying 11 more years by choice. And, there were so many reasons, Rachel, we stayed. The quality of life was and is phenomenal in a country like Nicaragua. People worry about Nicaragua. They remember the Iran-Contra stuff from the 1970s and early 1980s. I mean, that's like 40 years ago. 40 years ago, okay. Okay, whatever. If you still want to hold on to that, hold on to that. But a lot changes in 40 years, and a lot changed in Nicaragua in 40 years. And for people who actually care about the facts, right? Some people don't, don't let the facts get in the way of, what's the old saying? Don't let the facts get in the way of a good story, or, right. Don't confuse me with the facts, right? That's the other. But Nicaragua has been one of the safest countries in all of the Americas, in this hemisphere, second or third, many years running. So it's a very, very safe country, contrary to what we might remember from, the Civil War from 79 to 89, right? It was a very dangerous place then, but the Civil War's over. The Civil War's been over for 30 some years. The cost of living and the quality of life is phenomenal. We would have a bag of organic fruits and vegetables delivered to our home every Tuesday as a coffee sack. A coffee sack of organic fruits and vegetables delivered to our home every Tuesday morning. And it was $8. We couldn't eat it all. We couldn't eat it all in a week. We give it to our maid. We give it to our gardener. There's two examples of quality of life. We had a maid. We had a full-time maid, and it was less than $200 a month. And we had no chores. We didn't make our beds. We didn't clean our bathrooms. We didn't wash our dishes. We didn't sweep the floors. We didn't do anything. We didn't do laundry. We didn't do any chores for $200 a month. And what that really means, that sounds nice, but what's that really mean? What that means is a ton of free time to do other things that you enjoy doing. Like we would read with the girls. We'd go jump on the trampoline. We walked our tightrope in the backyard. We went to the mountains on the weekend. We went up to the cloud forest or to a butterfly farm. We went out to the beach. We just had so many things we could do as a family because we never had any chores. So our quality time together as a family was much, much greater. So for so many reasons, we stayed in Nicaragua for a total of 14 years and absolutely loved it. And contrary to what people imagine, remember, don't remember, whatever, those perception issues, Nicaragua is a wonderful, wonderful country that, I would move back to in a heartbeat.
Fantastic. So Mike, I know you have a couple of resources like the Nicaragua Handbook. If
Yes.
people want to learn more about the country, or also previously recorded webinars about the country generally. And if you want to hear more about the whys, and people can then reach out. What email address, or how should they contact you?
Yeah, OSC@ECIdevelopment.com. So the Offshore Club, OSC@ECIdevelopment.com. Just write Nicaragua Handbook or old webinars or something like that in there, and we'll send you that information. Ultimately, you've got to see it to believe it. We're big fans of people coming down, putting their toes in the sand, stomping around the country, checking it out. So many great, wonderful, fun things to do, whether it's seeing a smoking active volcano, hiking in the cloud forest, following the howler monkeys, taking rides on Lake Nicaragua, visiting old, beautiful colonial cities, or just laying by the beach and maybe doing a turtle program where you release baby turtles back into the wild when they hatch. There's just so many really cool things you can do in Nicaragua, but you gotta come visit. And I think that's really the bottom line. Come visit Nicaragua and let your own eyes draw your own conclusions about what kind of country it is. And I think, for the people I know that I've invited over the years, that they've fallen in love with Nicaragua because it's nothing like they imagined,
right?
And nothing like they imagined. Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, everybody, we look forward to seeing you in Nicaragua at some point. And Mike, thank you for that. Thank you for sharing your story. It's a wonderful one, and we look forward to helping other folks find the reality and possibilities in Nicaragua.
Yes, indeed.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks, Rachel.
For more information on the Offshore Club or to contact Rachel Jensen, visit www.offshore.club today. www.offshore.club. That's www.offshore.club. See you next time at the Offshore Club.